Hi everybody, welcome back. Tony again from Shinsho Yoga. And today I want to work on Anjaneyasana or low lunge. So there are a couple different types of lunges that you will see in a vinyasa or a hatha flow. The high lunge, of course, low lunge Anjaneyasana, and then the runner's lunge, or sometimes I like to refer to as an alternative low lunge. All lunges are to an extent a bit of a balance pose because you're going to stay up on the toes, right, of the back foot versus in a warrior position where you would have the sole of the foot down and pressing either back towards the foot or into the heel, where with the lunges, you're going to be up on the toe, driving that heel back, but without the heel actually on the mat. So there is a bit of a balance issue there with that, being able to do that. Not a true standing balance pose, but will require a certain level of balance to it. They are also going to require a certain amount of openness into the hips and in the legs. Also a certain amount in the shoulders also, because of what we do with our arms. And hips and shoulders are connected muscularly in the body. I mean, all of the muscles in the body are connected, but primarily hip and shoulder. The muscles in the back are kind of like a Z, so that opposite shoulder and opposite hip connect. You know, right shoulder, left hip, left shoulder, right hip. So sometimes if you have a shoulder issue on one side, it's not so much the shoulder, it may be the hip, but of course that runs down the whole leg. In our lunges, there's going to be some accessing of that to be able to help open that up. But in Anjaneyasana, or the low lunge, the kind of primary one you would see in a hatha flow, you really need some openness inside the hip here for it. Often when people will come into this pose, they can do it relatively routinely. As I demonstrate as I go through it, you'll see where people just put down the knee and bring the arms up, and they're more of a square position. Again, it's a lunge. So in the lunge, you want to be lunging. You want to be moving forward with that body, opening up the inside of the hip, driving one leg back while moving the hips forward. Pretty much in any lunge that you're going to do, whether it's Anjaneyasana, a runner's lunge, or the high lunge, you're always going to be driving that back foot back, right, while bringing the hips forward. It's that counter movement, that counter posing that we do in yoga. There's the balancing of it, where direction, we have one direction with the energy one way and one direction the other way. You know, in standing poses, we have the crown lift and the tailbone sink. In warrior poses, we're generally going to have one hip driving forward while the other one is driving back. In our lunges, it's very similar, but more having to do with moving the hips forward while driving a heel back, really driving that leg back. Anjaneyasana, a little bit easier though than a runner's lunge or the high lunge, because you don't have so much that balance issue. In Anjaneyasana, we take the top of the foot and the knee down of the back foot. Whereas in our runner's lunge or a high lunge, you're going to be balancing on that toe of the back foot, which can be challenging. Doesn't matter, doesn't mean that this doesn't have its challenges. It definitely does, especially depending on your body. But you're not having that balance issue so much. One of the things you want to make sure that you do in any lunge position you're doing is the squaring of the hips. This is a common mistake that I see in practice that I try to correct with my students, but it can be very hard in a group class to just say square the hips and explain what that means. The squaring of the hips is we want the hips facing forward. We don't want a shifting this way where the center of the body is facing off this way. Right? This can often happen in a lunge or a warrior where the center of the body is facing off this way. We want them forward. Even in warrior two. Right? In warrior two, though, because of the alignment of the feet, it's much more challenging to get that forward. And we do a torquing of the hip to bring that energy forward as best we can. Again, depending on the limitations and the openness of our body. But in our lunges, we take a wider stance. Right? In your lunge, you don't want the feet aligned. You want them hip distance apart. Right? So you can bring the hips square and have them point forward. So you can move the hips forward as you drive that leg back. So even in Anjaneyasana, the low lunge, even though we're not going to be up on the ball of the foot and be driving back into that, we're still going to be bringing that leg back, pushing that leg back, and driving the hips forward. So a squaring of the hips, very important. With the shoulders, when we come into this posture, as all of them, we want relaxed. Right? We don't want to be, driving up trying to grab, right? We want the shoulders to just relaxed with length. So in any of the postures that we do when we bring our arms above our head, right? Again, different styles of yoga will do this differently, but in Hatha Vinyasa, and again, how I learned, right? We always want to create that length. So again, this is a standing pose, right? Because we are going to be, to a certain extent, up on our feet. Again, the low lunge, bringing the knee down, more of a modification of that. But again, it is a similar idea of that lifting of the crown and sinking of the tailbone. So we want those arms above the head, but we want the shoulders relaxed. We don't want to bring them up by the ears. You want them to be relaxed and create that length. Again, it's that counter posture, counterbalancing, the oppositions that we do with the muscles. You want the energy to go up, but you want the shoulders to go down. So you want that tailbone to sink, but the crown to lift. In all of those poses. So whether we are in Anjaneyasana or the high lunge, right, it's the same thing. Whether we're in upward facing hands, if we're in warrior one, same type of feel. These basics extend across all poses. Right? So it doesn't matter which one we're in, it's going to be a similar feel. One of the issues you may run into, though, in this is you may have an issue with the knee, right, coming on the mat, depending on the thickness of your mat and the hardness of the floor that you're on. So if it's challenging, you can always take a blanket and bring it under the knee. And I'm actually going to show with the blanket on how that is done. But enough of me talking. Let's get to the posture. So I'm going to initially show with using the blanket to support the knee. So with your blanket, kind of just that one fold over that we would have, being back to where the leg would be, having this knee rest on it. And I'll show some different ways to transition into low lunge. But in general, Anjaneyasana, you want a square to the front knee. You want the back of the foot, the top of the foot and the knee down. You want the hips squared, right? The arms come above the head, palms face in, the shoulders relax, the head lifts, the tailbone sinks. You breathe. And you want these hips to move forward. You want to be able to sink into the pose. Initially, when people come into this, they'll come in and they do this. They do this kind of square that they do right here. Now, initially, if you are not open enough in the hip to be able to do it, that's understandable, right? It's the first positions you're doing, usually during a warm-up in the class, understood. But you want to begin to deepen your postures. So to do so, drive that leg back, slide that back. Bring that front knee to a square. Bring the arms over the head, the palms face in, sink into the hip, and breathe. Now, often in a class, a teacher is going to have you come into this from a lunge. Excuse me, not from a lunge, but from a forward fold, right? So, if we are in a forward fold, teacher will often tell you to plant the hands, step whatever leg back. In this case, I'm going to step my left leg back, take the left knee and top of the foot down to the mat. Right? I'm going to make sure my hips are square, and then rising up, arms above your head, palms facing in. Breathe. Sink into that, whatever your body will allow. So, a little bit basic today, an Anjaneyasana, low lunge. As always, remember to breathe and follow the breath. Namaste.